When I first took the job as a property manager, I thought it would be easy. Oversee a few buildings, collect rent, handle complaints. It was straightforward, or so I thought. But apartment 6C changed everything. The apartment had been vacant for months, though no one could give me a clear reason why. Bad vibes, one tenant said cryptically. Others avoided the topic altogether, their eyes darting nervously down the hall whenever I brought it up. Then Mark applied. His paperwork was flawless. Steady job, excellent references, clean background check. I was relieved to finally fill the unit. At first, everything seemed fine. Mark moved in quietly and kept to himself. But after a few weeks, the complaints began. "It sounds like he's dragging furniture at night," Mrs. Hill from 6B said. "And there's this smell." "What kind of smell?" I asked. "Like something died," she replied, her nose wrinkling. I promised to check it out, though I assumed it was an overreaction. People complain about the strangest things. When I knocked on Mark's door the next day, he took a long time to answer. When he finally did, his appearance startled me. His usually neat clothes were rumpled, and his eyes were bloodshot. A faint, sickly odor wafted from the apartment. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said curtly, blocking my view. "Some tenants mentioned noises." "I've been moving some furniture around," he interrupted. "Sorry if I disturbed anyone." I nodded, but something about his demeanor felt off. The complaints continued. Tenants reported strange whispers late at night, as if voices were coming from inside their walls. The smell grew worse, seeping into the hallway. Desperate to get to the bottom of it, I decided to visit Mark unannounced. When I knocked, there was no answer, but I could hear movement inside. "Mark, it's the property manager." No response. After a moment's hesitation, I used my master key to open the door. The stench hit me first, a nauseating combination of rot and decay. The apartment was a nightmare. Furniture was overturned, the walls covered in strange symbols drawn in what looked disturbingly like blood. In the center of the living room was an altar, surrounded by half-melted candles. On the altar sat something grotesque, a misshapen figure that looked almost human but was too decayed to be real. A low growl came from the bedroom. I turned, my heart racing, as the door creaked open. Mark emerged, but he wasn't the man I had rented the apartment to. His body was contorted, his limbs bending at impossible angles. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and his mouth twisted into a grin that stretched far too wide. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed, his voice layered with something inhuman. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Mark, or whatever he had become, lunged at me, his movements unnaturally fast. Somehow I managed to scramble to the door and slam it shut behind me. I ran down the hallway, not stopping until I was outside in the cool night air. When I returned the next day with the police, the apartment was empty. The symbols were gone, the altar was missing, and Mark had vanished. But the smell lingered, and no one ever moved into 6C again. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear whispers outside my window. Lisa and I had been planning this getaway for weeks. Life in the city was overwhelming. Constant noise, endless to-do lists, and the suffocating feeling of being boxed in. Pine Hollow was supposed to be our escape, a place where we could reconnect with nature and each other. When the rideshare pulled up outside our apartment, the driver, Sam, gave us a warm smile. His car was immaculate, and he had a playlist of soft indie music playing in the background. "Heading to Pine Hollow?" he asked, double-checking the address. Yeah, I replied. Looking forward to some peace and quiet. Sam chuckled. It's definitely quiet out there. Almost too quiet, you know? His words hung in the air for a moment before he added, Don't worry, you'll love it. The first hour of the ride was pleasant. Sam was talkative, sharing stories about his years as a driver. He recommended trails, pointed out landmarks, and even offered some local legends about the area. They say the woods out here are haunted, he said casually, glancing at us in the rearview mirror. Lisa laughed nervously. Haunted? By what? Depends on who you ask, Sam replied. Some say it's spirits of people who got lost and never made it out. Others talk about creatures, things that shouldn't exist. I rolled my eyes. Every forest has its ghost stories. True, Sam said, but his tone was different now, more subdued. As we left the main highway and turned onto a narrower road, the landscape began to change. The trees grew denser, their branches knitting together to block out the fading sunlight. The GPS on Sam's dashboard flickered, then went dark. Lost signal, he muttered. That's not a problem, right? Lisa asked, her voice tinged with unease. Not at all, Sam assured us. I've been out here dozens of times. I know a shortcut. The car veered onto a dirt path that barely looked wide enough for a vehicle. Gravel crunched beneath the tires, and the forest seemed to close in around us. Lisa leaned closer to me. This doesn't feel right, she whispered. Probably just saving us time, I said, though I couldn't shake the knot forming in my stomach. The deeper we went, the darker it became. The road seemed endless, and the once cheerful Sam grew quiet, his eyes darting nervously to the rearview mirror. What's wrong? I finally asked. Nothing, he said quickly, too quickly. Then it happened. A figure darted across the road, too fast for us to see clearly. Sam slammed on the brakes and the car skidded to a stop. What the hell was that? Lisa gasped, clutching my arm. Sam didn't answer. He gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. It's probably just a deer, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The way it moved was too deliberate, too human. Before we could recover, a loud thud echoed from the roof of the car. What was that? Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. Another thud, followed by the sound of something dragging across the roof. Stay calm, Sam said, though his voice betrayed his fear. He reached for his phone, but there was no signal. Drive, I shouted, the primal part of my brain taking over. Sam floored the gas pedal, and the SUV lurched forward. The dragging sound stopped, but the oppressive feeling of being watched remained. Is it gone? Lisa asked, glancing out the window. As if in response, the rear window shattered, and a long clawed hand reached inside. Lisa screamed, and I lunged forward, trying to shield her. Sam swerved wildly, the car careening down the narrow road. Whatever was on us let out a guttural growl, a sound that didn't belong to any animal I knew. Hold on, Sam shouted. The car hit a bump, and whatever had been clinging to it was thrown off. We didn't stop to look back. When we finally emerged onto a paved road, we were all shaking. Sam pulled over, his hands trembling as he turned off the engine. What was that? Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sam shook his head. I don't know. People talk about things in these woods, but I've never seen anything like that. We insisted on being dropped off at the nearest motel, far from the woods. The trip to Pine Hollow was over before it began. But the nightmares didn't end. Every night, I dream of that clawed hand and the growl that seemed to echo from the depths of the forest. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right. I swear I hear it again. Moving to New York City had always been my dream. I imagined the glowing lights of Times Square, serene mornings in Central Park, and a career that could only flourish in the vibrant pulse of the city. But dreams have a price, and in Manhattan, that price is steep. For weeks, I scoured apartment listings, my optimism fading with each absurdly expensive shoebox I visited. Then, just as I was on the brink of giving up, I stumbled across a Craigslist ad that seemed too good to be true. 2 BR in Hell's Kitchen, $850/month, no broker fee. I couldn't believe my luck. Hell's Kitchen, one of the trendiest neighborhoods, at that price. It seemed like fate. The listing provided few details, but the photos showed a clean, modest apartment in a charming brick building. Desperation and excitement drowned out any skepticism, and I immediately contacted the landlord. A man named Gerald responded within minutes, his message polite and professional. He said the apartment was still available and offered to show it to me that evening. I eagerly agreed, ignoring the nagging feeling in my gut that screamed this was all too easy. The building looked even better in person, its red brick exterior standing tall among a row of nearly identical structures. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. The elevator groaned as it carried me to the 5th floor, the dim, flickering lights overhead adding an ominous charm to the experience. Gerald greeted me at the door. He was a tall, gaunt man, his sharp features exaggerated by the shadows in the dimly lit hallway. His smile felt forced, the corners of his mouth twitching upward as though the effort pained him. "Come in," he said, his voice low and gravelly. The apartment was modest but clean. Hardwood floors stretched across the space and large windows let in the fading golden light of the evening. Gerald walked me through the layout, pointing out the small but functional kitchen and the 2 bedrooms. "Your room is on the left," he said, his bony finger pointing down the narrow hallway. "The other tenant, Bren, is in the room at the end. He's quiet, keeps to himself." I peeked into my room. It was small, just enough space for a bed and a dresser, but it felt cozy. Bren's door was shut, and Gerald knocked softly to introduce us. When there was no answer, he shrugged. "He's probably napping. He works nights sometimes." Despite the odd vibe, I signed the lease as on the spot. At $850 a month, I couldn't afford to let this opportunity slip away. Moving day was uneventful. My dad helped me haul my belongings up the 5 flights of stairs, grumbling about the lack of a functioning elevator. As we finished unpacking, he glanced toward Bren's closed door. "Where's your roommate?" he asked. "Haven't met him yet," I replied. "He's shy, I guess." That night, after my dad left, I settled into bed, exhausted but content. The city's hum outside my window felt like a comforting lullaby as I drifted off. The creak of a door jolted me awake. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate. My heart raced as I stared at my bedroom door, waiting for a knock that never came. The footsteps stopped directly outside my door, lingering long enough to make my skin crawl before retreating back down the hall. The next morning, determined to break the ice, I knocked on Bren's door. "Hey, I'm your new roommate," I called. Thought I'd say hi. No answer. I tried again, louder this time, but the silence remained unbroken. Frustrated, I left for work, deciding I'd try again later. That evening, when I returned home, Bren's door was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed it open. The room was empty, no bed, no furniture, No personal belongings, just bare walls and a single chair in the corner. A chill ran down my spine as I stood there, staring at the unsettling emptiness. The air in the room felt cold, unnaturally so, and I quickly backed out, closing the door behind me. The nights that followed were worse. Every night I heard the same footsteps outside my door. They always stopped in the same spot, just outside, and lingered for what felt like an eternity before retreating. One night, I decided I'd had enough. When the footsteps reached my door, I threw it open, ready to confront whoever or whatever was there. But the hallway was empty. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. My once exciting move to the city had turned into a waking nightmare. Then came the night I found the note. It was slipped under my door, written in jagged, uneven handwriting. "Get out. You're not safe here." My blood ran cold. Who had written it? Bren, Gerald, someone, or something else. I tried calling Gerald, but his phone went straight to voicemail. My frantic messages went unanswered. That night I locked my door and pushed my dresser in front of it for good measure. I lay in bed clutching a kitchen knife, every creak and shadow sending my heart racing. At some point, exhaustion must have over.